On today's Palace of Pistons podcast, we're talking about Tobias Harris, why some are upset with the season that he's had. We'll also talk about Jalen Duren, the struggles he's having, and the issues that it presents to the Detroit Pistons. And we'll also talk about how we feel the Pistons have performed throughout their first 15 games of the season. All that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. Let's get it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. It's myself, Aaron Johnson, and Jasper Apollonia with you for the show. Jasper, got some good stuff to talk about as the Pistons continue on in the season where they've had some really good moments. They've also had some pretty disappointing moments. We're going to talk about all that today and a little bit more. How you doing, my friend?
Not too bad. This is coming out on Friday, but right now I'm gearing up for the Pistons nationally televised game against the dastardly Charlotte Hornets. Let's be honest, they're like our biggest rival right now. It's really sad. But yeah, just getting ready for that. You're definitely right. It's been a week of ups and downs for the Pistons, and I'm just excited to get into it with you, my friend. Let's go.
I didn't even realize that the Pistons were on NBA TV tonight, but yeah.
That's all right. I don't think anyone else did.
Important to note, we are recording this prior to the Pistons-Hornets game, so this will come out on Friday, and the game will have played, but we won't. We're recording before, so we won't know the results or what happened in that game, so keep that in mind as we go through the show. But we do have a lot to get into, and I'm really excited to get into it. Before we do so, I want to give a quick word to our weekly sponsor. That's BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball to NHL, UFC, and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. As always, want to give a quick shout out to our Substack, palaceofpistons.com. It's in the show notes, the link to our website. Wherever you're watching or listening from, please take the 30 seconds that it takes to click on that link, go to our website. You're going to get prompted to fill in your email to subscribe to our website. That's completely free, and what that's going to do for you is get all of our content sent directly to your inbox as soon as it gets published. You have Mike Anguilano bringing you the weekly drive every Monday, recapping everything that's gone on in the last week with the Pistons, the latest news, recaps, rumors, reports, all of that good stuff. On Wednesday, someone else is bringing you some sort of content. This week, I wrote about J.B. Bickerstaff with some quotes from the head coach of the Detroit Pistons talking about the team's defense and the defensive identity that I can finally see the Pistons starting to build after years of saying, hey, we're going to be a defensive, tough-minded, physical team. We've heard that for years and years and years, and they've been a bottom-of-the-barrel defensive team every season. This year, the Pistons top 10 in defensive rating, and it's because of J.B. Bickerstaff and what he is instilling in Detroit. So wrote all about that, highly suggest you go check that out. And then on Friday, you're going to get our podcast sent directly to your email as well. And speaking of the podcast, take 5-10 seconds, wherever you're watching or listening from right now, hit the subscribe button, leave us a 5-star rating, drop a comment in the section letting us know you'll love the show. All that stuff helps tremendously. We greatly appreciate the support. And without further ado, let's get into the show. Starting off with the big offseason acquisition of the Detroit Pistons, Tobias Harris. I've seen a lot of discourse, and I've had a couple people reach out to me and like, hey, are you seeing this? A lot of people in the online Pistons community talking about Tobias Harris and saying that they're disappointed in what he's brought to Detroit this year. His averages, you look at him, and they're not, anything that really are crazy by any stretch of the imagination so far this season. He's averaging 13.5 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, a little under 3 assists, shooting 44% from the field and sub 30% from the three-point line. I mean, Look, I don't know how you feel, Jasper. I think this is interesting. I think Tobias has had gotten better for Detroit as the season's gone on. But where do you feel on this discussion amongst the Pistons online community?
Yeah, I think both sides of the argument have fair points to make. Look, Tobias Harris has been okay for the Pistons this year. He started off really, really cold, and I think that that's something you have to take into account when you're looking at his overall numbers. First four games of the season, he scored 10 points a game on 34% from the field, 17% from three. He just really struggled right out of the gate, but since that Philly game, he's been better. He was big in the second half of that contest. He's been closer to like 15 points a game on 47% from the field, 33-ish% from three. And having that, I think, has coincided certainly with the Pistons just looking a little bit better when you have a guy who's playing, 32 minutes a game for you every single night. And he's able to give you at least consistent enough production from inside of the arc. He's doing a better job rebounding than he has in a long, long time. A little bit of that is buoyed by the 14 rebounds he had against Philly, but it's certainly something. He's giving them something in that aspect of his game as well. That being said, it's the true Tobias Harris experience. You get 15 to 17 points from him every single game. And at the end of the game, you look at the box score and you go, oh, wow, wait, Tobias Harris had 17 points. I don't really remember him doing anything out there. So I think for me, it just is what Tobias Harris is. He's been fairly consistent for them. And while I don't think he's been spectacular, I think anybody that was expecting that of him misunderstood the reasoning behind bringing in Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris is not a guy that is going to give you these explosive outbursts of scoring. He's not going to give you these huge stretch runs where he takes over the game. That was the issue in Philly. They needed him to do that. He proved that that is not what he's really capable of doing. And I think that anybody who expected that from him was a little bit misinformed and doesn't really watch maybe enough games outside of the Pistons to really understand what he brings to a team. The reason you brought in Tobias Harris was so that he could provide a consistent, steady hand as well as that veteran experience. And I think he's done a fairly decent job of it so far. Am I giving it an A by any means? Absolutely not. He needs to be better from three. Like there's no question about that. I still think he needs to take a couple more threes a game, and he needs to start hitting them at a higher rate as well. It just hasn't been good enough from outside. He's not providing the spacing threat that you really, really need. But on the other hand, I think inside the arc, he's done a good job of providing a decent cutter for Cade Cunningham on drives. I think he's done an okay job of having those possessions where he's just going to go and like post up and take a fadeaway or try and get to the rim. He's done okay there. So for me, it's hard to say I'm disappointed in anything other than the 3-point percentage. But other than that, I think he's done fine. And I think most importantly, he's done okay on the defensive end of things as well. Like that to me is a big factor in what Tobias Harris has brought to this squad this year. And you're really seeing it a lot more, like that the Pistons have a positive net rating with Tobias Harris on the court this year. He's a steady hand. That's exactly what he is. Aaron, I'm interested to see if you feel a little bit differently. Like, have you been disappointed, or is it about what you expected?
I think if you asked me this after the first 5 games of the season, I'd say, yeah, like this is disappointing. They paid him $26 million a year to come in and be a key piece for this team, and he's been the complete opposite of that. But he's gotten better and better as the season's gone on over these last 10 or so games. And I look at those first 5 games, and it started off where, he just wasn't really making an impact out there, didn't really get a lot of looks early on, and then they started force feeding him the next few games, and he was just taking a bunch of bad shots because he was trying to find a rhythm, and the Pistons were trying to force him into a rhythm, and it never happened. And then they just kind of pulled back on that and said, okay, let's just play the way we want to play. Let's let Tobias's offense come a little bit more naturally. Let's not try to feed him. And it's gotten better. I think Jasper, you make a great point about his defense because part of the Pistons being, a top 10 defense right now, which they are statistically, is because of the stability that Tobias Harris is bringing them on that end of the court. They don't have Asar Thompson right now, arguably their best defender on paper. Tobias Harris is getting matched up against opposing teams' best forward. He's been tasked to guard opposing teams' centers at times, and he's done a very good job on that side of the court. I think it's clear where you want more from him. You'd like some more in the scoring department. You'd like him to knock down some more three-point shots. And Tobias Harris is a 35 and up percent three-point shooter throughout his career. You have to imagine that water finds its level at some point, and he doesn't shoot below 29% from the three-point line all season long. So I can get looking at it and being like, dang, you brought Tobias Harris in for floor spacing. He's not giving you enough of that right now. And, if you're just basing it off that, then fine. I guess you're right in that regard. You do need him to hit some more of those outside shots. The Pistons are still a bottom 10 offense in the league right now in terms of offensive rating. Couple more threes from Tobias Harris would definitely help in that regard. But he's definitely, the good from him has definitely outweighed the bad since, that fifth, sixth game mark of the season. I think that Philadelphia game, like you mentioned, really where he started to turn some things around for himself. And so I'm not disappointed in him. I think he's still kind of finding himself in Detroit. I think that's natural considering he just spent, 3-4 years with the Philadelphia 76ers trying to fit into a rotating cast of stars between Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, James Harden. The list goes on there, and he had to kind of figure out where he was going to fit in there. And I think we're seeing that right now in Detroit. I think Detroit's ready for him, wants him to take on a bigger role offensively, but it's not just going to happen overnight. So I think that he's trending in the right direction for sure. And, I think that the key thing to watch is, can that 3-point percentage start to climb up? Instead of him giving you 1 3 a night, can he give you those nights where he hits 2, gives you a couple nights where he hits 3? Like, that's going to help Detroit's offense, that floor spacing, him knocking down some of those shots that he's hit throughout his entire career. I don't think he's just gonna stop doing that. I think the discourse around him has been interesting. It's not exactly like what happened with Bojan Bogdanovic. I feel like fans got on him very, very quickly, especially last year coming off that injury. And I feel like everyone's just like so anxious right now because the Pistons are actually looking like a competent basketball team for the first time in years, that you want to see them win every game. You want to see all their players playing well. And I get that, but it just doesn't, it's not all linear. Not everyone's going to be on at the same time every single night. So just have a little bit of patience in that regard. Tobias Harris is going to figure it out and be a more consistent shooter. I'm not too concerned about that. I'm not concerned with how he's playing at all. I think he's trending in the right direction, no doubt.
He and Fontecchio, to me, are kind of in the same boat in terms of people kind of getting on them because they've mismanaged their expectations and they're seeing the thing that they're most expecting or wanting from those guys, not necessarily coming through. And the things that they do provide to this team kind of slipping through the cracks a little bit. Like the NBA, let's be real, it's a highlight driven league. Like you notice the spectacular plays and it's really easy to miss the little things that slip through the cracks that really make the difference between winning and losing. Like both of those guys, Fontecchio has one of the best defensive ratings of any player on this roster. And not just that, like he plays really well with just about everybody. Like there's only 3 two-man lineups that they lose with Fontecchio on the floor. That's with Ronald Holland, Wendell Moore Jr., and Paul Reed. And with Paul Reed and Wendell Moore Jr., he's only played a combined 54 minutes with those guys. So like you look at Fontecchio and you look at the outside shooting and you say, well, I was expecting him to be this offensive dynamo that he looked like when he was, when they traded him to Detroit. But like Simone Fontecchio is a backup. Like he is a backup. I've always seen him this way. And I think some people just wanted him to be more. With Tobias Harris, he is what he is. He is a guy who's going to get you 15 to 20 points on every given night, but it's going to be every given night. And he's going to do it with good efficiency, not eye-popping efficiency. He's not going to have huge games and then bad games, and you kind of forget about the bad games because the good games are so good. It's the same thing every single night. Fontecchio to me is kind of in the same boat where it's like, yes, he needs to do better in terms of shooting. I don't think there's any question about that for both of those players. But the other things that they're bringing you in terms of team defense, you can't see those in the box score. You don't see that in the highlight reels. And it's easy to miss even when you're watching every single game. But I think both of them have done a good job in the role that they've been asked to do. The issue is people just expecting something out of them that is never going to be there,
I'm glad you brought up Fontecchio because he is kind of in the same boat as Tobias Harris. Fontecchio started the season off horribly. It was like, what happened to this guy? This guy was 15 points a game last year, super efficient shooter, solid defender, looked like he was a key piece. And he came out this year and looked the exact opposite of that. And I think right now, coming back off that toe injury, he's looked a little bit better. I think, I don't want to go back to the Monday night game. That's ages ago in this league at this point. I mean, you go from Monday to Friday, so much happens. But the game against the Bulls, I thought Fontecchio actually played really, really well. He only had a couple shots, but I thought defensively he was doing a really good job. And I looked at the way he was playing, and I saw the way how Tim Hardaway Jr. was playing, and Hardaway really was struggling out there shooting. I think he was 1 of 10 or 1 of 11 from the field. And it was like, man, I wonder if they should have just given Fontecchio some of those closing minutes because, Tim Hardaway obviously wasn't in a rhythm and a flow, and the Pistons needed some stops. They needed some more consistent shooting, and Fontecchio was giving them that on that given night. So hopefully he's trending in the right direction as well because I certainly think he still can have a significant role on this team. And I'm not sure what changed for him at the start of the year. I know he was injured to end last season, and so maybe there was some rust there. I wonder if the role change coming off the bench, playing in shorter spurts, not necessarily having the same freedom that he had, in the 15 games that he played with Detroit last year. I wonder if that was a little bit of a shake to his confidence as well. But I think he's also trending in the right direction, and I'm glad you brought him up because I know people were very, very hard on him originally at the start of the season, and that's a guy that I was saying I wanted him in the starting lineup. I wanted him and Tobias Harris at the forward slots together. So good to see him trending in the right direction as well. We'll see if his minutes maybe start to increase, but with Asar Thompson coming back, I think that those forward minutes get really, really interesting. I'm very curious to see how Asar Thompson plays into the rotation. And we talked about it last week on the show, and does it impact someone like Ron Holland? But I think the Pistons might need to look at some ways to get Fontecchio on the court a little bit more. Maybe stick him out there with Cade Cunningham a little bit and see if they can continue to build on the chemistry that they had last season. I mean, Cunningham did a nice job when he was out on the court with Fontecchio in the Bulls game on Monday. So I'm wondering if they can try to sort of rekindle that duo that was building some nice chemistry last year.
Absolutely. And the thing with Fontecchio too is like we're still dealing with small sample sizes here. That's something you absolutely have to remember. Like all of these are small sample sizes. Simone Fontecchio, first 2 games, started 1 of 6 from the 3-point line. And since then, he's shooting 36% from 3, almost 37% from 3. The Pistons with him on the court since then have a net rating of 4.6, positive 4.6. He has a defensive rating of 104.3. Oh, that's the best mark of anybody who's played more than 100 minutes for this team over that span. So to me, you have to take all of these stats with a grain of salt. I loved your article, by the way, and I think what you said about the Pistons establishing an identity on the defensive end of the floor is absolutely true. Their wings have played a big part of that, and that's guys like Harris and Fontecchio and Isaiah Stewart. And, I just think that like when you get Asar Thompson back, that only helps everything. I do want to say it's a bit of an aside, but the Pistons defensive rating being so much better, like playing such better defense over the last, 3 weeks or so, a big part of that has been Cade Cunningham. Like just cutting down on his turnovers has been such a big thing. And I'll bring it back to like the small sample size where Cade over the course of the season, he's one of the highest turnover guys in the entire league. Like his turnover percentage has been just awful this year. I think he's still at like what 4.6, something like that. But when you break the season down into different segments, it's very different. Like first 7 games of the season, Cade was 11th in the NBA at 6.9 assists per game. He had an assist to turnover ratio of 1.33. That's terrible. You look at the last 9 games, Cade's 4th in the NBA at 10.3 assists per game. He's got a better assist to turnover ratio at 2.45 than Derek White, Jason Tatum, James Harden, SGA, Domantas Sabonis, Steph Curry, LaMelo Ball, De'Aaron Fox, and Tyrese Maxey. Those are all guys that he's in that same kind of conversation with in terms of playmaking. So just being able to cut down on those half-court turnovers where you're giving the team the other ball, like giving them a fast break opportunity, just gifting them 4 to 6 points every single game on something like that, and hurting your own offense at the same time. Just being able to do something like that has made such a big difference for this team. So you have to take, I think, every stat at this point with a little bit of a grain of salt, because you can break the season up into these, 8-9 game samples, and it makes such a massive difference in how you're looking at all of these players.
Yeah, and when you say take every stat with a grain of salt, you're certainly right. I mean, the Pistons were, I believe, 6th in defensive rating heading into Monday night against the Bulls. By the end of it, they were 10th in the league. So they dropped, 4 spots, which is not insignificant, but it just shows you how small the sample size is right now, how small all the numbers are right now. But if you're watching the games, you might say, well, okay, if that's the case, why are you talking about them, being this much improved defensive team if it's only been such a small sample size of games? But that's where watching the games and using the numbers together gives you, those types of conclusions, because they just look like a completely different team on the defensive end of the court right now. It's like they were playing with blinders on last year, or didn't realize that defense was part of the game of basketball last year. And JB Bickerstaff has really brought them to a whole new level on that side of the court. And I think you're right with Cade Cunningham. And JB Bickerstaff brought that up before the game on Monday. He said, paraphrasing here, with Cade taking this leap defensively, with Cade buying in as much as he has defensively, it's giving everyone else no excuses to take a possession off, to take a night off defensively, because the guy that's doing everything offensively, the guy that's carrying, this team on his shoulders is giving you that type of energy defensively. And certainly there are still plays where Cunningham takes that possession off, doesn't make the rotation, doesn't slide over, doesn't contest the shot, and you're like, dang, you've got to give that play there, you've got to make that play. But it's been so much better, and it's been so much better even, I think, from like the first 5 games of the year. You talk about Tobias Harris starting slow. I think Cade Cunningham's defense the first 5 games of the year was like, this guy's got to buy in. He can't be Luka Doncic when he doesn't make that same type of impact offensively that Doncic does. He certainly can't play defense like him, and he's been a lot better really since then. So I think he's played a big part in that defense. Moving on into our second topic, but kind of sticking with where we found ourselves talking about the defense, we need to talk about Jalen Duren. And he's someone we've talked about already this season on a couple different occasions. But as time continues, I think we're sitting here, again, going back to the game on Monday, Nikola Vucevic has a huge game from the outside. He knocks down, 6 3-pointers. The Bulls dropped 23 3-pointers on the Detroit Pistons. And they just hunted Jalen Duren, dragging him into the outside, putting him in pick and roll action, popping it out to Vucevic, popping it out to another big, getting Jalen Duren out on the perimeter, getting him switched. And they just hunted him the whole game. And it was apparent from the start that that was their game plan. The Pistons have to figure this out, because they are on the verge of having an elite defense. And I mean elite, which is crazy considering where they were last year. But something holding them back is their 3-point defense. And a large part of that is on Jalen Duren. Now, it's not just all on Jalen Duren. The Pistons do play a lot of drop coverage, which makes them susceptible to 3-point shooting, specifically from ball handlers and the bigs in that pick and roll action. So it's not all on him, but there are also possessions where if you're watching the game, you see Jalen Duren not paying attention, not coming off that screen hard enough, not getting his hands up, not closing out, not recovering. It's just not been good. And I think you look at the other centers on the Pistons roster. Isaiah Stewart's had a really effective season. Paul Reed is capable of getting minutes, but hasn't always been in Detroit's rotation this year. Hasn't been in it if Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart are both healthy, active, and not in foul trouble. Do they need to move Jalen Duren out of the starting lineup? Do they need to move him out of the rotation for a little bit? Do they need him to sit and learn and give these other guys a chance? I mean, I think Paul Reed has a case for some minutes, and he's not getting them right now. I'm curious where you're at on this, because it's a contract season for Jalen Duren. If there was ever a time to go all in, give everything you got, make the most of your minutes, like, it's now for that guy. Because you're talking about being capable of earning well over $100 million by the summer. And we're not seeing great things from Jalen Duren. Where are you at? Because people are frustrated, and I tend to get it.
Yeah, look, we've been talking about Jalen Duren's defense on this podcast for a while now, and I think what you said is totally fair. It's not all on him. He was the most visibly obvious issue against the Bulls because Vucevic hit, like you said, all those threes. He just could not guard him whatsoever. But like Tobias Harris was awful as well defensively. Like, and I know I gave Tobias Harris a pass kind of earlier on in this podcast, but he was terrible in those defensive actions as well. The Pistons rotations in general were not good. And I think a part of that has to come just from what they played 5 games in 7 days. Like, you're going to be tired coming off of that. You came home from a back-to-back. Like, that's just tough. It's not easy on your body. We'll see how they look against the Hornets tonight. For me, though, Jalen Duren's defense, I think it's easy to point to that game as being like, oh my God, this can't work. But it's been an issue the entire season. For me, I don't think you can bench him. I don't think you can put Isaiah Stewart in the starting lineup over him either, because that, in my eyes, just absolutely destroyed Jalen Duren's trade value to other teams. And I'm at the point where I threw it out on Twitter a couple days ago. I think they should look into moving Jalen Duren this year. And that is definitely something that is going to be a controversial opinion with people. I understand. You look at his numbers, look at his age, look at his physical profile. I understand all of those things. But to me, the most important aspect of what he brings to your team, which is interior defense, he has not improved on since his rookie year. He has not improved on his perimeter defense at all. Like, he continues to get absolutely destroyed by stretch bigs. He gets destroyed in the post by skilled bigs. I think of somebody like Jonas Valanciunas last year just taking him to school when they played the Pelicans. And the other offensive aspects of his game haven't really matured in the way that you'd like them to either. He still has no range. His free throw shooting has actually regressed this year. His assists to turnovers are awful. He has one of the highest turnover percentages in the entire NBA. He's not able to create his own shot. You can look at how good his field goal percentage is, but to me, that's actually a worrying thing. That means he's regressing on the offensive end, because all he's getting is open dunks and layups and, buckets off of offensive boards. That's all that he's scoring on right now. And that's great for a backup center. That's fine. You need that garbage man. But that's not going to cut it in the NBA. In this NBA, when you look around the league and you look how almost every single team has a skilled big man, they are just an absolute necessity. And that is, for me, the reason why I think you have to look into trading Duren. I am scared about handing him an extension after this season. And you can go, well, you don't have to extend him. You kind of do in today's NBA. You either have to extend a guy or you need to trade him. Because
can I stop you?
Please.
You just ran through all of the deficiencies in Jalen Duren's game. and I don't disagree with a single one of them. So who the hell is trading for him?
That is the issue. That is the issue.
That's the problem. I mean, it's a problem that he's not helping you because you need Jalen Duren to help you. We said it in the offseason. For this team to be the best version of themselves, they're going to need Jalen Duren to take a leap defensively, and he hasn't. He hasn't at all, unfortunately. And I just you look around the league, every team either has an established center or they have a project young big that they're already working on. I mean, like the only team I can think of off the top of my head that would trade for Jalen Duren is maybe the Pelicans.
You beat me to it. That's the team I was going to say.
Remember in the summer when we're like, okay, if the Pistons want Brandon Ingram, maybe Jalen Duren's involved in that deal. They're not sniffing Brandon Ingram with Jalen Duren being the a top piece in that package. I just feel like his value after watching him this year, it's probably cratered. I'm not in a front office, so I don't know how the rest of the league views him, but I have to feel like his trade value's taken a rather significant hit with just how much he struggled. And I don't know, maybe the Pistons need to make some changes schematically to try to cover some of his inefficiencies. But the problem is they're still a top 10 defense right now with them. So what if they just replaced the issue with something that was just adequate? He doesn't have to be a world beater, but just adequate defensively. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing right now. But all with deficiencies. And I'm thinking, well, before that you said they need to trade him, and then you ran through everything that he's doing poorly, and I'm like, we're not doing a great sales pitch. Right?
No, but that's the issue that you're running into with him. Like, I think we have approached the Sadiq Bey zone, which is you get a guy and his rookie year, you look at him and you go, man, this guy is putting up historic production for a rookie. And then his second year doesn't do quite as well. And you go, that's all right. He's still very young. He has a lot of upside. Let's just see what we get from him in his third year before we make a decision. And then the third year hits and it's like, oh no, we can't win games with this guy. Like this guy is actively hurting us when he's on the floor. He doesn't fit in really with the rest of the rotation. He's not helping out the other guys that are on your team that as of right now, you have to just feel better about in terms of their development. And also there's not really anybody that wants to pick him up. Like that's what happened with Sadiq Bey, where you end up having to take a terrible package for him. I mean, again, we said it before, we'll say it again. Take the 5 second rounders next time, but whatever. For me, I think that's genuinely where they are quickly approaching, because you can't bench him or else he loses any sort of trade value. It's not like Isaiah Stewart. Like Isaiah Stewart is fine. He's a really good defensive backup big. I love what Isaiah Stewart brings to your team, but you can't be starting Isaiah Stewart next year. That just cannot happen. So you have to figure out what you are going to do with Duren, because he's not made any improvements on the defensive end. He hasn't improved on the offensive end. If anything, he's regressed a little bit there. And now his trade value is tanking. And again, if you have two options this offseason, either you extend him to where he's going to be asking for more money than Isaiah Stewart got because he's the starting center. Like, why would you give your starting center less than your backup? That doesn't make any sense. So you're either paying him probably $20 million a year, which isn't what it used to be, but considering you also have to pay Jaden Ivey, and then the year after that, you also have to pay Asar Thompson. These price tags are going to start increasing. You have a clean cap. You can sign free agents, but you're putting yourself into a position where you won't be able to sign free agents after that because you're going to be way over the cap. And if you don't re-sign him, well, then he's going into next season without a future contract. He's going into restricted free agency, and you're forced to either A, extend him a qualifying offer and leave him in unrestricted free agency where you get nothing for him, or B, have to match what somebody else gives him in a restricted free agency, which there's a very good chance one of these rebuilding teams as of next year is going to throw a bag at him, some sort of a bag at him. So to me, I think you're very much, this is just me just going like, I want to avoid one of the things. I think, like, he didn't get a good return for him, but I think Troy Weaver was right to hit the eject button on Sadiq Bey when he did. He was like, we got to get anything back for this guy because we can't pay him and we can't let him leave for nothing. I think you're rapidly approaching that point with Jalen Duren because he doesn't have the instincts. And I know people are going to talk about the youth, but he doesn't. Defense is a mentality. Guys come into the league and they're either good defensively or they're bad defensively. There's very few players who start off bad defensively and turn into really plus defenders. And the guys that do, generally, it's because they turn into role players. I'm thinking of like your Dennis Smiths Juniors. You know what I mean? Like those are the kinds of guys who go, okay, I need to switch up my entire game. I don't see that happening from Jalen Duren. I really don't. And frankly, I don't want to be the team that pays him to find out. So I'm getting to that point where like I really, really think they should be listening. Like they should be listening to offers. And like you said, I think the Pelicans are maybe the only team. Maybe you can find somebody else that'll give you some picks for him. Maybe you package him and like Malik Beasley and you actually get a protected first rounder back for him at the deadline. But
right now,
I know, but I'm saying like it depends. I think a lot of it depends on where the Pistons are at the trade deadline. You know, I think it's going to be situational, but they have to be thinking about it. They can't not think about it because you look at the playoffs and all the teams in the playoffs, those are teams that their centers will destroy Jalen Duren. Destroy them.
Yeah, I look across the league and it's just like, as I mentioned, most of these teams already have a center that's solidified or is a developmental project right now to the point where why waste your time on Jalen Duren? The other, big thing there is he's contract extension eligible this offseason. Now he doesn't have to get it. He can play next year and be a restricted free agent after that. And that's, maybe that it's not as big of a deal. But in a lot of cases, teams I think are starting to get guys under contract before they ever even hit restricted free agency at this point, especially those top side draft picks, which Jalen Duren was. So I just feel like the Pistons are in a tough spot there. Part of me wonders, if there's regret in the organization right now that they didn't pay for a Nicholas Claxton or didn't go after, maybe someone like Jonas Valanciunas who signed a pretty friendly deal with a team that's in a similar position in the Washington Wizards. I feel like the Pistons are in a tough spot because you're right. As good as Isaiah Stewart's been, it's not really a starting center. And I don't know if you can get away with 2 6'8", 6'9" centers for 48 minutes a night in Isaiah Stewart and Paul Reed. And so I don't know. But what's going on right now is teams are hunting Jalen Duren, and it's hurting the Pistons a lot. They are on the verge of being a really, really, really good defense, and I think that's a big thing holding them back right now. So definitely something to watch as the season goes on. This could all go away if there's a leap there, if there's a greater buy-in there. I feel like it can be there, it can happen, but like the clock's ticking on it because I don't know how much the Pistons are going to continue to just be okay with what we're seeing on the court every night when it's so obvious how big the issue is.
No, it's a huge issue, and I think it just stands out even more when you look at what like everybody else has been doing defensively this year. Like even Jaden Ivey, I mean, look, he's not a great defender by any means, but he's definitely bought in more at that end of the floor. Like he hasn't been actively destroying the Pistons. It's not that they don't have any like, and look, I think that's also the problem too. It's like you don't have a perfect defensive rotation there either way. Like there are holes on their perimeter defense regardless. I think the problem is Jalen Duren is just he's too limited to make up for both of it. He's not able to adequately defend the rim when perimeter players do lose their man and get blown by, and also guard the perimeter. So it's just, if you have a stretch big, it's just so easy. You just run pick and pop all day long. And the problem becomes even more obvious when you do see Isaiah Stewart out there and how he like hedges on these pick and rolls and how he's able to, manipulate the guard in the lane before getting out to the perimeter and allowing his man to come back and contest those shots. while not giving up open threes on the outside. Like, you just see how different it is. Duren is just, I don't know if it's an issue of he can't do it or he won't do it, but the recognition isn't there. And it's the little things. It's the little things he's not able to do. I worry genuinely that those are just things you can't really learn. You can learn all the basketball stuff you want to learn, but like there's a reason, coaches aren't on the floor in the NBA. They know a lot about the game, but playing it is a totally different thing. And vice versa. We've seen all of these former players who play at such a high level and they can't figure out how to run X's and O's to save their lives. They're not the same skills. Like, they're not the same thing. And to me, Jalen Duren just is missing that little bit of mojo. He's missing that little bit of oomph. I just I want to be wrong. This is one of those things where it's like I desperately would like to be wrong on this, but at this point, I'm like, I've seen enough. If somebody else wants to figure it out, they can figure it out. I feel pretty good about where I'm at.
Let's wrap with this. The Pistons through 16 games as we record this. They're 7-9. Currently a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. How do we feel about what we've seen from the Detroit Pistons so far this season?
Right now, they're not even in the play-in. Who would have thought? They're the 6th seed. They're the 6th seed in the East as of right now.
In the playoffs, and I'm like, wait, I swear I just
no, baby, we're not play-in. Screw that noise. We're going to the playoffs, baby. Yeah, I think you have to feel excellent about this. There was that Pistons team that started off 14-6. Was that how they were through the first 20 games? That was back in 2018. That is the most positive. This is the most positive I've felt about a Pistons start to the season since that team. Like, it's been, not to quote the Bare Naked Ladies, it's been way too long since you've had a team that, even if we don't know where they are necessarily in the pecking order when the season is through, like, there's still a lot of things that have to play out. There's still a lot of statistical noise on the table. But this is the most positive I've felt about a Pistons team in years. And I think you have to. Like, you look at the way they compete, there's frustration, but there's also a lot of unknowns. They've only gotten blown out truly twice. They've lost 2 really close games. And the reasons they've lost those games are because they couldn't hit free throws. Like, both the game against Charlotte and the game against the Houston Rockets, they shot under 70% from the free throw line in both those games. They shoot over 70%, they win those games, period. And just having those be your frustrations instead of tuning into the fourth quarter and being like, 10-point game, it's over. The opposing team's going to extend that lead to 20 in the next 4 minutes, and they do every single time. Just being able to watch competitive basketball, it's a sign of things turning in the right direction. They still might be sellers at the deadline. Malik Beasley still only on a 1-year deal. Who knows what's going to happen there? We've talked about our concerns with Duren. But overall, I think you have to feel really, really good about the direction this team is heading, not just because of the win-loss record, but also because of what you're seeing on the court and the way that they compete and the kind of mentality that JB Bickerstaff has instilled in this squad. I mean, at this point last year, we were already like out on Monty Williams. This year, really, outside of the Bulls game, that's really the only game where I've been like, the coaching staff cost them in this one. Like, the coaching staff really hurt them by playing Duren as much as they did. That hurt them this game. Last year is like, I don't even know where to start with this team. So definite improvement. Are you feeling the same way, Aaron?
Well, I just don't see how you would feel negative. I mean, you watch last season and you look at this season and you see a completely different team. You've seen Cade Cunningham playing at an all-star level. You've seen him and Jaden Ivey have success together. You've seen Jaden Ivey return to that level of a prospect that he was after his rookie season, where like this guy has the makings of being a really good player in this league. The veterans that they've brought in have had some really good moments. Malik Beasley's been an absolute positive injection into this roster, into the locker room. He's played a major role for them on the court. He has been a great person in the locker room to Kate Cunningham, to Ron Holland. He's been a great leader. Tim Hardaway Jr. has had some big moments as well. I know he had the rough shooting night against the Bulls, but other than that, he's been rock solid this year. We've talked about what Tobias Harris has brought to the table. And hell, even someone like Marcus Sasser, who we talked about a lot through the offseason and the preseason, saying, hey, like this isn't looking good with him right now. He's gotten some opportunity lately. He's not being asked to be the backup point guard. He's being, he's still playing with one of Jaden Ivey or Cade Cunningham. And the results have been pretty positive for him, at least offensively, in terms of knocking down some shots and making some positive contribution to the team. So, look, through 16 games, if you would have told me that the Pistons would still not have Ausar Thompson back, but they'd be 7-9 and have a playoff spot, you couldn't possibly tell me that is a bad thing or have negative context around that. The Pistons are trending in the absolute right direction. I think JB Bickerstaff has done a really, really good job holding guys accountable, building the right habits. You're seeing it. You're seeing the importance of having a leader and a coach and some veterans in the locker room that knows what it takes to play on a nightly basis and get those young guys out there focused and ready to go. We've even seen the improvement from the start of the year to where we're at now in terms of getting better late in games, getting better at running your offense, not isolating one-on-one, not throwing bad passes and turning the ball over a million times. It's not perfect. It's not great, but it's gradually gotten better as the season's gone on. So, look, I'm as negative as I was last year. I think I can be a little positive now, and it can be okay to be positive because I just genuinely think the Pistons are trending in the right direction, and they're about to get a big boost back in Ausar Thompson, who is, whether you want to call him the X factor or a major factor for this team, however you want to sell it. This is a top 5 pick from a season ago that had some really, really good moments in his rookie year that they're going to inject into a top 10 defense. And obviously he is a very, very good defender. So intrigued and excited to see where the Pistons are heading as we continue here.
Yeah, and we should provide a little update on Ausar Thompson. He's probably going to be back next week. He had a little G League assignment, probably just to get his legs underneath him. He's, I believe, listed as doubtful for tonight's game, so he's probably not going to play. But my guess is by next time we record, we'll have something to talk about in regards to Ausar Thompson playing for this team. We'll see if he ramps up his minutes. Final thought on where the Pistons are right now. We've been talking about just context this whole entire time when it comes to a lot of these players, like where they are and what the expectations should be. You want context about where the Pistons are at this point. Just look at the other teams that were at the bottom of the standings with them last year. Washington, Toronto, Charlotte, not New Orleans, Utah, Portland. They have more wins than all of those teams. They have more wins than Charlotte, Toronto, and Washington. Like they're doing a lot better this year. I mean, they have more wins than Toronto and Washington combined. So to me, when you look at the teams that they were in the same range with last year, and you look how those teams are doing versus how the Pistons have improved in one off season, to go from the doldrums of the league to the worst record in the entire NBA to being the 6th seed. Yes, we're only 16 games in, but you are the 6th seed as of right now. Contextually, you have to look at that as just a massive, tremendous improvement. And I think Trajan Langdon, JB Bickerstaff, and honestly, the players themselves for buying in all deserve a great deal of credit for having the organization where they're at right now. Last year, that was the bleakest season of maybe any team I've ever supported in my entire life. And they've completely injected a new life into this team and into this fan base. So I know people are still frustrated about a lot of things on this team. Yeah, they're not a good team. Like, just think of it like that. You had an atrocious team that is just now a normal, below average NBA team. But when you think about how hard it is to get from that first place to where you are now, you gotta be happy with it. You gotta take the wins that you can get. So I'm very, very happy about where Detroit is. And I think with Ausar Thompson coming back, they have a lot of room to improve as well. a lot of room. So we'll see.
Super interested to see where the Pistons head from here with that return of Asar Thompson, how that impacts the rotation. Certainly going to be interesting because Asar Thompson eventually, even if it takes some time for him to get built up into it, is going to have a pretty big role on this roster. So really interested to see how that shapes out. But that's everything that we had for this week's show. We greatly appreciate everybody tuning in each week. We would greatly appreciate you taking a moment now, if you didn't already at the beginning of the show when I brought this up, please take a moment to leave a like on the podcast, wherever you're watching or listening from. Give us that 5-star rating. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think about what we talked about today. Where are you at with Jalen Duren? Are you disappointed or happy or satisfied with what Tobias Harris has brought to the team so far? How do you feel about the Pistons through the first 15 games of the season? Tell us what you're thinking. We really, really need your support. And again, our Substack, palaceofpistons.com. Just type in your email. It takes 10 seconds. You get all our content sent directly to your email, free of charge, as soon as it's published. But that is going to do it. That puts a cap on another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. We will see you guys next week. Back for another show. Take care, everyone.